He knows we're up to something. Come here! Come here!
Back in.
So let's start with what is classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is basically training someone to associate two events that are not normally associated. This association causes a reaction, which makes it different than operant conditioning because operant conditioning is dependent on the behavior, but classical conditioning is a reaction. For example, flinching, which is not something that you choose to do. To understand more, let's look at an experiment done by Pavlov, who is the father of classical conditioning. Pavlov would call the dogs to eat using a bell, eventually leading them to associate the sound of the bell with being fed. Pavlov fed the dogs meat powder, which is the unconditioned stimulus, meaning that he didn't have to train them to salivate, which is the unconditioned response. The bell ringing is the neutral stimulus because the dogs didn't have a positive or negative association with it. However, Pavlov continued to immediately feed the dogs after ringing the bell, building up that association and eventually leading the dogs to cut out the middleman of the meat powder and just salivate at the sound of a bell. Okay, before we had my dog, he was a stray, and he learned this weird reaction that whenever your phone dings, he will whine and get scared. So my hope with this experiment was to train him out of that and instead get him to associate the noise of the phone dinging with a positive emotion.
This is him before being classically conditioned out of a negative reaction. Oh, Roman. Okay, we're gonna try to play the sound while he's on a walk because he likes being on a walk. So maybe this will help.
Boy, Roman. Good boy, Roman. Play the sound. Good boy, Roman. Good boy, Roman. You're a good boy. Good boy, sweetie. Good boy, sweetie.
He did freak out less. We are not doing that because he actually was very terrified. Like, he was so scared he would not take a treat out of my hand. So we're gonna find something else for him to associate.
Okay, here is the new and improved experiment. I'm going to get him to wag his tail, which is like an instinctual response to feeling happy. I'm going to get him to associate that reaction with opening a treat jar.
Basically, we just got this new treat jar and it makes a noise when you open it. And so I'm gonna see how long it takes him to associate that sound with getting a treat. Does not care. I'm gonna give him a treat every time the noise happens, and then maybe he'll start to associate it. Okay, this is after like 2 minutes. Ah, look, it's working! It's not a perfect system. It's not a perfect system. There he is.
You know that takes a little time.
It'll happen. It'll happen. Roman, come here.
Come here, baby. Aw, he loves you. He doesn't want to.
I mean, he is wagging his tail. It seems like a slight success. Roman. We'll see if he'll go back to it. If you tap it a lot, he will. It's worked a little bit. Try it again. Roman, come here. Whoa! I mean, the sound of the jar is working. It just has to be a loud sound and a repetitive sound. Good boy, Roman. Good boy.
In conclusion, I think this experiment was successful because I did get him to react with a tail wag to the sound of the jar opening. What would make this more successful is if I had more time, because then I think the sound of the jar could be more subtle and his reaction might be more excited. But all in all, it was successful.